Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and GameFound over the next week. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. We do this every single week, so if you want to stay up to date, this is definitely the place to be. But before we get started, I do like to go over some new announcements and discoveries that I just found out about over the past week. And I just have a couple to go over real quick here. And the first one is that they just announced a deluxe edition of the game Santorini. This one's also going to be coming with a expansion that's going to allow for co-op play as well. And this is going to be known as the Deluxe Pantheon Edition. This is a game that already has really nice components, so I'm not sure what they plan to do with the deluxeification of it, but I'm sure it's going to be pretty impressive. Also, for all of you that are a fan of Clank and Clank Legacy, which is a game that's been getting a lot of positive reviews around it, they just announced Clank Legacy 2, which is going to be a sequel to that original one. And of course, if you want to know more about these games once they actually launch, I will be covering them in much more detail in the week that they launch their campaign, so make sure to subscribe down below. Other than that, I just want to say if you do like these videos, I do work with Alex over at Boardgame Co to make sure that we're providing you with the most up-to-date info as possible. We both track the games individually, but then we just sync up periodically to make sure that we're all up to date. But Alex puts out a video at the start of each month going over the entire month and letting you know of the games that we know about so far. And he just put out that video 4 hours ago, so you can go ahead and check that out to get a little bit of a sneak peek of what's to come. Of course, there's a lot of games throughout the month and they're constantly changing, which is why I do these videos every single week. So if you want to get a little bit more up-to-date information as the month goes on, make sure to subscribe to my channel as well. It's probably a good idea. And another thing, Alex is actually hosting a retreat in the month of July in Connecticut. So if that's not too far your way, I definitely recommend checking it out. Tickets are on sale now and I'll be there, Alex will be there, and a ton of other people from the community. Be a great time to play some games, see what's new in the industry, and of course, just hang out and have fun. And I do hope to see you there if you are going, and you can always reach out to me on the Discord, which I have linked in the description below, and I'll do my best to maybe meet up if you want to play some games or just hang out. It's always exciting to meet some new people, and honestly, that's really where I find the most value in these different conventions. The conventions are fun and nice and offer a ton of things to do, but it's always just meeting people and hanging out afterwards that I always enjoy the most. But that's it for an intro, and we got a decent few games launching this week, so let's check them out. And the first campaign we have launches on April 4th, and this one's called Terminus. This plays 2 to 5 players and takes about 90 to 180 minutes to play, and this is a competitive subway building game where players are going to be trying to use route building as well as resource management in order to score the most victory points at the end of the game. Players are each going to be starting out the game with their own personal player board where they're going to be keeping track of their coins and resources throughout the game, as well as their stations and tracks that you'll be putting out onto the main board to build out your subway. Players are actually going to be starting the game by putting out their main station, which is known as the Terminus, and this is going to be where all the tracks are going to be starting from as you continue to build them throughout the game. The game plays over 4 rounds with each player taking turns performing one action, but this is where the really interesting aspect of this game comes into play, because in order to do your actions, you're going to be using this action loop. You'll only be able to perform the actions that are in front of you in a clockwise rotation, which means that you can jump ahead as far as you want, but every time you complete a full loop on this track, you're going to be moving another token up the time track, and you can only do that twice, which means that you can only move around the action loop twice, which means that you could just jump ahead one action space at a time and perform every single action, taking a ton of actions in a round, but that's often probably not the most strategic way to play the game, so you'll be jumping ahead trying to take actions before other players and trying to take advantage of different opportunities. These actions will allow you to do all sorts of different things, like buy more engineering resources or power, which you'll be using in order to build and operate your tracks, gain a new development tile, which you can immediately place adjacent to any of the tracks, and this essentially acts as a new action that players can perform, and you're going to be starting with your meeple out on that space. You can also use your action to move or place meeples onto those new development tiles as they're placed out on the board, allowing you to perform the action that they provide, or you can also gain upgrade tiles to gain bonuses at different points in the game, expand your subway, sign up for shared objectives which will allow you to score them at the end of each round, or even gain and complete secret objectives. The game continues like this, but then after 4 rounds, players are going to be adding up all their victory points, and you're going to be gaining victory points for the number of stations that you put out, stations that you have adjacent to the different developments, any shared objectives that you're able to complete, any secret objectives that you're able to complete, as well as any of your remaining coins. And of course, the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game, and if you're interested in this one, you can check it out in the description below. Also launching on April 4th, we have Vedur, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 20 to 80 minutes to play, and this is a competitive card game that I thought was launching a few weeks back, so I did already cover this one, and I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. And in this game, players are playing as different seers of the village, exploring the different areas of the village and visiting the townsfolk, as well as different spiritual realms, in order to use all this information to make prophecies about the future weather patterns. During a player's turn, they're going to be choosing one of the basic actions on their player board by putting their token onto that action and then taking that action. And these different actions can allow you to do different things like draw more cards into your hand, or lay down and match the weather cards with the various weather tiles. And in order to do this, you're going to be matching icons between the cards and the tiles, and then sliding your card underneath that tile. You'll then be putting one of your colored cubes beside that icon on the tile to show that you are the one that fulfilled it, and then the tile is going to be completed as soon as all 4 spaces are filled. And there is also an action that allows you to do a combination of drawing cards as well as playing them. The players that contributed to those tiles will be gaining points once those tiles are completed, but players can never play the same action twice in a row because on your following turn you're going to have to move your action token to one of the other action spaces. And the player with the most points at the end of the game wins the game, and of course if you want to know more, I have links in the description below. Also launching on the 4th, we have a new expansion for the game Project L, and this is a game that originally played 1 to 4 players, but then there's an expansion that expanded it to 5 players, and this new expansion is actually going to expand it to 6 players, and this plays in 20 to 40 minutes, and this is a polyomino tile placement game where players are going to be competing to complete different shapes, starting with just 2 tiles to their name, but then throughout the game, as you're completing new shapes, you'll actually gain new polyominoes, but then you'll also be able to reuse the ones that you used in any of the shapes that you've already completed. This means that you'll actually be building a little bit of an engine that's going to open up new shapes to you to build, and as you gain more, of course, you'll be able to complete those bigger shapes. This new expansion is going to be adding new shapes into the game, but these are going to be appearing later in the game, and they are designed for the purpose to allow those smaller shapes to still be useful even in the late game. Not only that, but this also expands the player count to 6 players, and as I mentioned, this isn't the only expansion for this game, and I did cover the previous expansion and this game in the past in the previous campaign, so if you want to know even more details, I'll just go ahead and roll that footage for you now. And Project L is a fast-paced engine-building strategy game where you're completing puzzles to earn points. Each puzzle that you complete is going to earn you more pieces to complete harder puzzles, but then the pieces you use to complete those puzzles you also get to keep. So you can see how this builds your engine as the game progresses. You're going to want to be optimizing your actions better than your opponents so that you can complete harder puzzles at the end of the game. If you can build up a sufficient engine of pieces for completing multiple puzzles at once, you can actually unleash the master action, which lets you put a piece on all your puzzles with only one action. This campaign is also going to offer the Finesse expansion, which is going to add some extra objectives to the game, and when you complete those, you earn yourself some coins, which you can spend to perform extra actions on your turn. This game is going to be offering some really nice components with the acrylic polyominoes and some very nice modern looking double layered boards for you to complete those puzzles on. Also launching on April 4th, we have one that I'm really excited about, and this is for Mindbug Beyond, and this is going to be a standalone expansion for the game Mindbug, which is a game that I did cover previously, but it's essentially a 2-player card battler designed by Richard Garfield, who also helped create games like Magic the Gathering as well as Keyforge, which are both highly regarded games. But this is the smallest package of them all while still packing a punch, and that's one of the reasons that I'm so excited about this one, because the game looks like a ton of fun, but you don't have to buy a ton of different decks or a ton of different cards to try and build your own deck. Instead, everything you need to play a game is completely encapsulated in a single deck of cards. And like I said, these are standalone, so you only really need one deck to play the game, but if you're looking for more options out there, or if you already own Mindbug and you want to change it up a little bit, it's definitely one to check out. And I did cover the original Mindbug campaign in the past and explained how the game plays, so if you're interested to know more, I'll go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. And there are a lot of interesting design decisions going on in this game, and I'll even go out on a limb here and say that this is probably the most depth to complexity that I've seen in a competitive strategy card game. This game just really seems to take all the good parts out of strategy card games, makes it super streamlined, and removes all the fiddliness. And it all just fits in a single tuck box, which I assume is going to make it really affordable, easy to play, and super easy to transport. And this game uses a single shared deck of 48 creature cards that both players are going to be drawing from, but you only draw from it at the start of the game. Players are going to be drawing 5 cards into their own personal draw deck, and then they're going to be drawing 5 cards into their hand. So you only have 10 creature cards to play this entire game with. But you do have 2 more cards that you will be able to use, and those are your personal Mindbug cards, and I'll get back to those shortly. But in this game, players will be taking turns performing just one action from two possible options, and the two options are to either play a card from your hand out onto the board, or to attack with one of the creatures that you already have out on the board. And playing a card in this game doesn't require any resources and there's no deck building, so it's really quick to ramp up and you can just go ahead and play whatever you like. But if you do attack your opponent can choose to defend against that card with one of the creatures that they have out on the board already. Even though the turns are already super quick in this game, I really like this because it adds another decision that your opponent can make even when it's not their turn. And this game just does away with all the fiddly health, strength, and energy trackers, because when two cards attack each other, it's just the one with the highest strength that wins, and the lower strength simply gets discarded. But if your opponent can't defend against your attack, or if they just choose not to, they're going to take a hit of damage, and each player only has 3 health for the entire game, and if you go down to 0, then you lose the game. And similar to Keyforge, some of these cards will have some different effects and abilities that get triggered at certain event triggers in the game. For example, they could trigger when you're attacking, being attacked, or when you put that card out into play. There's also 5 different keywords that can show up on different characters, and you can actually have more than one keyword on a single character, but I'll just go through each of those quick. The first one is the Frenzy keyword. And this allows a player to attack twice if it wasn't killed on the first attack. And then there's the Hunter keyword, which allows the attacking player to decide which of your opponent's cards are going to defend against your attack. And then there is the Poisonous, which is going to always kill your enemy opponent, no matter if their strength is higher or lower than yours. And then there's Sneaky, which can only be blocked by other sneaky creatures. And then there is the Tough keyword, which essentially gives that character a second life. But what really makes this game interesting is the addition of these Mindbug cards that I mentioned earlier. Each player is just going to have 2 of these, but what they allow you to do is to steal a card from your opponent. So anytime that your opponent puts a new card into play, if you still have some Mindbug cards left, you can choose to discard that Mindbug card in order to take control of your opponent's card and bring it onto your side of the board permanently, where you can use it to attack and defend. This adds a really interesting dynamic with some light bluffing, where players are going to be trying to play cards that either they don't think their opponent is going to try to mindbug, or they're going to try and bait their opponent with certain cards that they do want them to mindbug because they have better cards in their hand that they'd rather keep for themselves. But then at the same time, using both your Mindbug cards too early means that you don't have that trick up your sleeve for the rest of the game. So this game just sounds incredibly well designed to me, but I did want to be sure, so I checked out the ratings over on the ratings tab, and there are quite a lot there. But what we really want to see are the people that actually played the game, so I'm just going to filter down to the ones that have comments. And there are a ton of great reviews here from people that have played the game. And if we look at the ratings breakdown, nearly all of them are above a 5, and most of them are at 8 and higher, which is probably one of the best rating spreads that I've seen on mostly any games. And I'm not saying that this game is going to blow you away or be one of the best games ever made, but for how simple it is, I think it's going to pack quite a punch, a masterpiece for what it is, and it fixes a lot of the issues that I had with Keyforge, and I'm nearly 100% that I would just always rather play this than Keyforge, so I will probably buy this and get rid of all my Keyforge decks. And if cleaning up my shelf doesn't earn you a pick of the week, I don't know what does. Super excited for this one. If it looks interesting to you, definitely check it out. I'll leave a link in the description below. Also launching on April 4th, we have Roma, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 120 minutes to play. And this is a competitive Eurogame where players are going to have 3 workers that they're going to be placing out onto the board in order to perform different actions. But the interesting thing about the way that the actions work in this game is that there's actually a grid of actions, and players are going to be putting their workers into one of the spaces within that grid. That's going to allow the player to take 2 actions, the one that's in their column and the one that's in their row. But something that's really cool adding on to this is that at the start of every single round, the Emperor is going to be moving to a random space within that grid, and if that Emperor or another one of your own workers is in that column or row of the actions that you're going to be taking, you're actually going to get a more powerful action, upgrading it once for each one of those meeples that are within that intersection criteria. And the different actions that players can perform are to visit the market in order to buy or sell goods or cards, gain an upgrade tile that's going to gain them a special ability as well as influence, gain follower cards which come with their own abilities or scoring potential, bet on a chariot track. There's a few different chariots and they're going to be moving up throughout each round, and players will be able to bet on which one they think will be in the lead in order to gain victory points for that. But each player will also have their own set of ships located in the ship region of the board. You're going to be moving those around in a bit of a race because the first to get to the end of that ship track is going to be getting special bonuses, but you'll also be gaining any of the bonuses that you cross over when you move that ship. But this game is called Nova Roma, so of course players can pay to build buildings and help develop Nova Roma. And the way that that works is that there's a few different regions in a Nova Roma map, and you'll be able to choose to build in those different regions depending on how many times you're able to upgrade that action. And when you do perform that action, you're going to be placing your colored cubes anywhere within the available region's grid, and that's going to be earning you victory points at the end of the game, as well as special bonuses if you're able to encapsulate the special icons located in those grids. But there isn't just the main player board that players are going to be concerned with, because each player also has their own personal board, and there is an action to be able to interact with that board, and that's the Gain Artisans action. And whenever you do that, you're going to be gaining an artisan meeple that you'll be able to add to your board, and your board also has a grid on it. It works the exact same way, so wherever you put that artisan meeple, you'll be able to gain whatever is in the column and the row of that grid, depending on where you decide to place it. But the difference here is that instead of this grid granting you actions like it does in the main board, it's going to be gaining you resource generation. So there's going to be a whole bunch of different resources in each row and column, and if you put multiple of these artisans in the same row, that does get powered up as well, gaining you more and more of those resources. And of course, players are going to be trying to use and optimize these actions in order to build their own little engine and gain the most victory points. But there is also a personal objective boards that each player is going to have, and these are going to have all sorts of different goals that you can try to complete in order to gain different benefits and resources, or they can also gain you victory points at the end of the game. These are going to come as their own separate cards, so these can actually be different from game to game, adding some more variability each time you play the game. And of course, the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game, and you can find links to this campaign in the description below. Also launching on the 4th, we have an expansion for the game League of Adventures Rocket Race. And this plays 2 to 6 players and takes about 20 minutes to play. And if you're not familiar with this game, this is a game where players are going to be competing to try and be the first to get to the moon. And in order to do that, of course, you're going to need to build a rocket ship. And in order to build a rocket ship, players are going to be bidding on different components in order to put that rocket ship together. The minimum requirement you need to attempt to launch to the moon is 1 propulsion system, 1 capsule, and 1 steering mechanism. But of course, if you try to get there with the bare minimum, it's going to be much more difficult, because when you decide to actually launch your ship, you're going to be adding up all the values of those different cards, and then you're going to be rolling 2d6s, and if the value that you roll is below the total value of the cards that you have, then you have successfully landed on the moon. So this means that the higher that value is, the higher chance of success. And of course, if your rocket ship does not make it, there will be consequences. But this new expansion is going to be adding brand new rocket parts that you can just mix into the game, as well as new event cards, workshop upgrades, and new leagues for the advanced play. I don't know exactly how all these new mechanisms are going to fit into the game, but if you are interested in this one, you can find a link to the campaign in the description below. I'm sure there'll be a lot more info on their campaign page once it launches. Also launching on the 4th, we have Shuffle Kerfuffle, which is a push your luck game for 2 to 7 players. And the way this game works is that there's always going to be one active player, and they're going to be holding the entire deck to the game. That player will be able to draw as many cards as they like, and there's a few different cards that you can draw. There's the point cards and utility cards that you are hoping to draw, and you can have a maximum of 3 utility cards. So if you do start drawing more of them, you can either discard or use the ones that you have. But then there's also 2 bad cards that you don't want to draw, and this is the Shuffle card and the Kerfuffle card. Of course, you can choose to stop your turn at any point, and that'll allow you to lock in any of the points and utility cards that you've gained so far. But if you hit one of the Shuffle or Kerfuffle cards before you decide to do that, that's going to cause you to bust and immediately end your turn no matter what. If you happen to draw the Shuffle card, that's going to cause you to put all the cards that you drew back into the deck, and you'll get nothing for that turn. But even worse, if you happen to draw the Kerfuffle card, that's going to have you return all the point cards that you've gained so far. But there are some ways to protect yourself from this, and of course that's by using those utility cards, because one of those utility cards is a safe card, and you'll be able to hang on to that until you decide to put it on top of your collected points deck. And you can do this at any time, and that's going to secure any of the cards below that safe card. So any cards that you gain after that could be lost if you happen to draw the Kerfuffle card, but all the ones beneath it are protected. That means that you want to place that as late as possible, but you don't want to wait too long because you're putting more of your cards at risk. And there is also the anti-shuffle card, and if you're able to collect 3 of these and then the Kerfuffle card gets drawn on your turn, then you'll actually be able to discard all 3 of those cards in order to assign that Kerfuffle to one of the other players. Some of the other utility cards allow you to do things like peek at the next few cards in the deck, or even steal cards from the other players. And since some of these abilities do grant you with some additional information, you're actually allowed to shuffle the main deck as much as you want. So if you do happen to see a bad card show up, you can choose to either just pass and send that deck off to another player, or you could choose to reshuffle and continue to draw. And the player who is able to collect the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And launch on April 5th, we have a new addition to the Zombicide line of games, and this is going to be called Zombicide White Death. And this is going to be a sequel to the medieval fantasy version of Zombicide known as Zombicide Black Plague, but this one's going to be making a few improvements on it based on the changes that they've made in the more recent Zombicides, like separating the Abomination deck from the main deck, which in my opinion is a huge improvement because now you're always going to have a balanced deck of zombie cards, but then you'll still be able to have the variability of different abominations showing up within a single game because you'll just have generic cards in the main deck that just tell you to draw from the Abomination deck, and that allows the game to maintain the same ratio of Abomination cards in that deck while still being able to expand your overall variety of Abominations available. But this new expansion also adds some brand new surprises as well, and I'll get to those right after I explain a little bit about how the game plays for those of you that might not be familiar with Zombicide. Because each of these games offers you a ton of different characters to choose from, and players will be choosing their characters at the start of the game, and they're going to have some base abilities that you start out with, but then as you kill zombies you're going to be gaining experience points which you can then use to upgrade and unlock different paths of abilities for each of your individual characters. Players will also be choosing a scenario which is going to instruct the players on how to set up the board and also what their objectives are in order to win that game. There might also be some special rules and actions outlined for that specific scenario, so you can actually get quite a lot of variability from game to game. And the way this game works is that it's going to be alternating back and forth between the player's phase and the zombie phase. During the player's phase, each player is going to be able to take actions on their turn, doing things such as moving, attacking, searching for items, or opening doors. And as players are searching and completing objectives, they'll be adding new gear and upgrades into their repertoire, which might also allow them to make ranged attacks if they have a ranged weapon. But players will also have to keep in mind that as they're making actions, those actions create noise and can attract zombies their way. So you can actually use this to your advantage if you want to try and persuade the zombies to go to a certain location. But after all the players have performed their turn, then it's going to move into the zombies phase where the zombies are going to be performing an action for each of the zombies out on the board. And the zombies basically spend a set number of action points moving towards whichever character is in their line of sight and then attacking that character if they're in range. Of course, if no one is in their line of sight, then they're going to be moving to wherever the most noise happened. After that, a card's drawn to see what new zombies will spawn onto the board, and then the rounds continue like this until the players have been defeated or they have completed their objective. And this new edition of the game is going to be introducing players to a winter-themed environment that comes with its own perks, including a new freeze mechanism. And for those of you that are fans of Game of Thrones, you might see a lot of similarities here because players can also build giant ramparts, which are basically giant walls that break up the board into different regions, preventing any crossing of zombies across those walls. And this next change seemed a little bit off-brand to me, but maybe that's just me, but for whatever reason, CMON decided to add in some humanoid animal hybrid characters into the game. I don't think they really offer any unique mechanisms, they just add a bit of flavor and history into the game, but these are going to come in the form of canine and cat people. Like I said, there is a freeze mechanism, and this is going to allow players to temporarily immobilize the zombies by freezing them, and then players will also be able to take advantage of lighting different cauldrons of tar that they can dump over the top of the walls in order to douse anyone standing below in liquid fire. There's also a brand new type of necromancer that creates a trail of corruption that grows towards a specific zone in the game, and if the corruption ever reaches that zone, then the game is also lost in this new way. On the bright side, this necromancer never moves from the zone that it spawned, but anywhere that its corruption progresses is going to be creating new spawn points for other zombies to show up. But that's not it, because there's also a new Con Abomination. This is a new type of zombie with huge arms that's able to climb up the rampart walls freely, but he's not the only one that's able to climb those walls, because you can also draw a siege card from the zombie deck. That's going to allow all of the zombies to siege up onto the walls, creating tense moments that players are going to have to contend with. Luckily, your side of the battle is not limited to just the player's characters, because there's also going to be some non-player controlled guards that are happy to lend a hand. Players will be able to take advantage of these to help them push back the zombies as you try to complete those grander objectives. And of course, if you're able to complete those objectives before any of the lost conditions, then the players win the game. And if you're interested in this one, you can find links to the campaign in the description below. And those are all the campaigns I have for you this week, but don't leave yet because we still have an awesome giveaway to announce. And this one's going to be for Heroes of the Pacific. And all you have to do to enter this giveaway is leave a comment down below. You don't have to like, you don't have to subscribe, but I do appreciate it if you think I deserve it and you want to see more content like this. But Heroes of Pacific is a 2-player head-to-head strategy war game where players are going to be choosing a scenario that's going to be dictating the objectives that each of the players is trying to complete. And then players are going to be putting their troops out onto the main board and then using order tokens in order to order their troops to perform different tasks. Each of these order tokens are also going to have an initiative value on them, and then they're going to get resolved in that order. So players are going to be taking turns performing the actions that those order tokens allow. Of course, you can have more units out on the board than you have order tokens, so after all of those have been resolved, players are just going to be taking turns performing basic actions for each of the units that they have remaining. And this giveaway is going to be for the really nice Semper Fi pledge, which comes with the core box, all unlocked stretch goals, as well as the Battle Pack number 1, and the War Stories number 1 and War Stories number 2. And to enter this giveaway, like I said, all you have to do is leave a comment down below and you can say anything you want, but if you're looking for something specific, maybe you could let us know what your favorite or most interesting historical war moment is. For myself, it's definitely the Christmas truce. You can look it up. It's a really interesting time during World War I, where during Christmas Day, 2 battalions made a truce where they played a game of soccer together. I couldn't imagine the anxiety of going into something like that, but it is the closest thing there is to a heartwarming story in a very terrible time. And it's too bad that previous wars couldn't have just ended with something that was a little bit more like this. And that's everything I have for you this week, other than drawing the 2 giveaways that we had last week. And those ones are actually going to be automatically drawn on the Discord, so there's nothing I have to do in this video, but make sure that you check out the Discord to see if you won. You should get notified if you have the app installed, but the 2 giveaways we had was for a pledge for Fatal Knockout and a pledge for Dreams of Yesterday. So if you're watching this video early enough, you can check out the Discord in the description below. All you have to do is click an emoji underneath the giveaway on the giveaways channel in the Discord, and that'll get you automatically entered into that giveaway. And that's everything I have for you this week, except for that's a lie, because I do have another video going up later today, so make sure to stay tuned for that. It's a very special one where I'm going over my entire collection in detail. I know a lot of you will probably enjoy that, so make sure to check it out. And until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.
Go.